Good afternoon, Honorable Minister Kojo Oppong Nkrumah. I'm very much privileged to be here to interact with you. We are 5 months into the second term of Nana Akufo-Addo, President Nana Akufo-Addo's government, and we don't have the government set up now. Actually, 5 months, and the DCs are not yet appointed. The deputy ministers are still not yet vetted, and it's basically like the government is now skeleton. What has accounted for the delay in the government setup?
I think unlike the 2016 election, the 2020 election started off with a contestation. And therefore, even the whole spirit around which a government was formed was a bit different in the second term. In the first term, there was very less apprehension. Parliament was very speedy in approving the president's ministers, and therefore that also gave oomph for the quick approval of deputy ministers, formation of boards, chief executives, etc. In this particular instance, you would notice that the kind of cooperation was a bit different from the first. Nonetheless, the president has got his ministers in place. Government, or the top tier of government, is being fully filled. He's nominated his deputies. Unfortunately, Parliament is on recess. We had envisaged that during this recess, the Appointments Committee could even start work. And so we vested residual powers in the Speaker. When I say Speaker, I mean Parliament vested residual powers in the Speaker to be able to forward or ferry the President's request to the Appointments Committee even during a recess. That hasn't necessarily been completed, and so you haven't seen the vetting take place. But I do know that the president has a clearly penned down list of who he wants to put in what position to deliver, and as quickly as Parliament gets the next level out of the way, he will complete the appointments of deputy ministers and consequently boards and chief executives. The process for the appointment of municipal and district chief executives is also just commencing. The president has put in place a framework to assess the work of those who worked in the first term, and based on that, have an opportunity to make a decision on the second term. In 2017, there were no carryover MMDCs from his own administration per se, so that was a clean slate and therefore easier to deal with. It's not exactly the same at this time around. So those are the differences, but this is how the president is working on that path.
Okay, but then it's been 5 months. Let me just ask, do you think the president couldn't have done it early on before, we getting into the 5th month of the year?
In the midst of the peculiar scenario that we have now, this is how he's been doing it and consulting and ensuring that he gets it right at every step of the way. And we're optimistic that shortly he'll be done with it.
Can you give me specific timeline as to when the government will be formed or the setup will really happen?
As I mentioned, the top tier of government is already in place. We're waiting for the deputies to be vetted and approved. That is not in the hands of the executive to be able to give a timeline on. Parliament will decide, for example, how long it will take, when it will complete it, when it will put the report before the House, and all of those processes. So it is not something for the executive alone to give a deadline that by this time I would have finished. No, you've got to do it in consultation with the other arms of government.
Don't you think this will impact the economic development that we expect, in President Nana Akufo-Addo's second term? Because if these ministers, the deputy ministers and the DCs and all these people are not actually vetted, appointed and all that, what do you think about that, the impact of this delay of the government setup?
You're right. Admittedly, it chips a bit at how much you would have wanted to do by now as an administration. But I guess it's not too far off the template or the expected timelines. And so though you can agree that it will have chipped from how much work you would have wanted to do within this period, we can also be optimistic that as quickly as possible, we can finish with this exercise so that full throttle government can deliver on its commitments.
Let me just tie in the Fix the Country campaign that is going on, because basically it's about development and the people, the youth, complaining about the government's performance in the second term. Do you think because of the delay of the government setup, that's why we're not seeing as much as we want to be done in the country?
No, I don't necessarily share that view. If I follow that campaign, one of the first things they talk about is what they say is failed promises from successive governments. That have nothing to do with this current administration.
But they also make mention of other things that are happening in this current administration, like the irregular power supply, like the fuel prices.
I'm coming to that. So the first thing they talk about is that they have challenges with broken promises or unfulfilled promises from successive governments. And I'm saying to you that that is not about Akufo-Addo's administration. The second thing that they talk about is that they have a desire to see some things quickly resolved. And I think that that is a desire that we all share as a people. And if we just go back a bit, the administration has actually been outlining and forecasting that these are the challenges ahead of us and this is how we have to deal with these challenges. So like you saw the finance minister did, he reiterated some of the things that had been foreseen and programmed to be dealt with. And one of the things that was missing was the spirit of collective responsibility, which he's been encouraging, that haven't all come to the conclusion that these things must be quickly dealt with. We should add to it the conversation of what is our collective responsibility in that area. So I don't come to the view that it is a delay in formation of government. That is what has translated into this. I come to the view that some of these, indeed a good number of these, are very legitimate concerns that both government and the people should engage in a conversation on everybody's responsibility in fixing or in dealing with. And I think that that has started in a very healthy manner.
Just getting from you what you just said about the Fix the Country campaign, actually, let's stay there a little bit. Some government officials, their response to the Fix the Country campaign was fix your attitude. What is your take on that?
I speak for government. The government position that I've articulated doesn't correspond with those ones that you talk about. The vice president, who is the number 2 man in the land, when he had an opportunity to articulate the government response, doesn't go in accordance with that. The finance minister, the national security minister, they did not necessarily subscribe to those views as have been expressed by some people. Indeed, if you look at the conversation, and that's the democracy we have, you will find, I've seen other celebrities take on other celebrities, I've seen other journalists take on other journalists, I've seen politicians take on politicians, but the government response has been that this is a healthy conversation. It opens the door for us to broaden it, ought not to be politicized, but to be taken advantage of in the pursuit of a certain common agenda for our people.
So what's the government's official position? Though you have said it right now, are you distancing yourself from the Fix Your Attitude campaign that
the government has never embarked on that kind of campaign. The government's position has been that this is a healthy conversation. It gives us an opportunity to reiterate or to go back to some of the key things that we've been outlining need to be dealt with. And while at that, broaden it to look at what our collective responsibilities in executing are.
Okay, please, let's get back to the government setup. Yes, you've told us that very soon there will be things in place and everything will, the president can now start the actual work. And then you've not really
started the actual work.
I mean, well, that is what you're saying, and we take your word for that. And I'm saying that is what you're saying because that is, when you listen to what is happening right now in terms of the Fix the Country campaign, the information is different. That probably the president is sleeping
views. on. No. People have different views.
Okay.
And the fact that people have different views does not necessarily mean, excuse my language, one is and the other is whatever. That is the beauty of a democracy. People have different views. Those views may not necessarily derogate from the fact. The fact is that his ministers are in place, public institutions are functioning, albeit awaiting the confirmation of boards and chief executives and deputy ministers. I think we can understand that and agree on that, and at the same time also embrace the calls that people have that some particular matters should be dealt with.
Minister, let's move to what the president said last year, in one of his regular national addresses on COVID-19, and he said that his government will construct 88 district hospitals and 6 regional hospitals in a year. And bring it down to 2021, months have elapsed. We have not seen anything being done. I want to ask you, is the president still committed to this?
My understanding is that he's very committed to it. He put in place a working committee to deal with it. That committee has done extensive work. They've made available, or they have reported on parcels of land that have been made available by districts across the country. Then they went into a validation exercise. I think over 85% of those parcels have been validated as being without encumbrance and available for this purpose. The committee, I understand, has done extensive work. Indeed, in some cases, my understanding is that award letters have been given for various lots, and our expectation is that pretty shortly they should be making a full announcement of which ones are commencing work, so that we can all now chase them on the 1-year timeline that they will have.
Was it not just for campaign?
I don't think so. If it was, all of this work wouldn't have happened now.
Can you give us, as information minister, can you give us timelines, because we want to know when the project is starting and when it's completing, where you are having the projects?
Well, as I mentioned to you, the president put in place a committee to do that job. That committee has done a lot of work, including accessing lands from the various district assemblies, validating those parcels of land. In some cases, I understand, issuing award letters to it. Now, the next step that they have ahead of them is to put all the work they've done together and update the country that this is where we are, this is where it is commencing, and this is where this is when you expect these projects to be completed. And once they are ready, we are more than happy to host them and to provide that platform for them to outline this.
The president said it to be done in a year. Do you share that belief that it could be completed
Those
in a year?
are the timelines that the consultants have made available, that because of the technology they are using, when they start, they can finish it within a 12-month period.
Let me also ask you about the president's interview on CNN just on Monday, May 3rd. The president was asked about corruption, how he's dealing with corruption in Ghana here. And if you permit me, let me just quote a portion. He said that a lot has been done, and it has reflected in Ghana's growing position and rankings of corruption in the world. We've gone up several notches since I came into office because we are dealing with these matters at the basic level. And then he went on to talk about institutions in place and all that. Well, when you do the analysis of what the president told CNN, it appears to be the opposite of the reality, what is being actually what is happening in the country right now. And then when you look at the corruption indicators, all of them say something different from what the president.
The perception indicators.
The perception indicators. That's what I mean. The corruption perception index. That's by Transparency International and another. Yeah. So actually, when you look at the worst performance in terms of the corruption perception index.
Perception.
Perception index. Of the previous government, the Mahama government, the worst of President Mahama is the best of President Nana Akufo-Addo. So, would you say the president peddled falsehood on CNN?
I think the president was quite clear about his commitment and what he has done. The kind of budgetary improvements and increases to the anti-corruption agencies. I don't think that is a matter that is in contention. You have heard some of the key actors in these anti-corruption bodies themselves attest to the fact that budgetary allocation and the resourcing that is required for them to do their work has improved. If you compare that with what used to happen in the past, where we kept making this argument that if you really want these bodies to be independent and function, make resourcing available to them, you can come to a conclusion clearly that commitment has been demonstrated in this area. But the president has also said over and over again that corruption is not going to be fought by one hero. You're going to need to build strong state institutions, resource them for them to deliver on that task. So for me, the big question is that, is the president doing that? I think the answer is quite clearly that he is doing that. What we need to do is to focus attention on these state institutions that have been tasked and resourced to lead that fight and ensure that they succeed in it. Beyond that, some of these side debates, I think, do not contribute in any way to deal with the real issue ahead of us, which is that we want to have a society in which there's value for money, a society in which the taxpayers' money is put to prudent use, a society in which corruption does not become a rewarding path for people who are looking for a quick dimension to make money. I think that those are the critical and important issues. And those are the things that we should consistently be keeping an eye on. For those other issues, they become sensational headlines, and they really don't contribute to the substantive fight ahead of us.